Okay.
I just said it. Welcome to Biohacking Wellness.
We can't make that any more cringy, can we?
Oh, sure, we could. Okay, let's hit it.
Okay, so we are coming up. This is the week of January 16th. The first month. We're already halfway through the first month of the year.
Crazy.
So last week we had our metabolic reset class, and it was
a full house.
It was a full house, and it's up on Facebook, so it's pinned on my Facebook page. I have not uploaded that to YouTube. Did we record that one, Mitch? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll get that uploaded to YouTube so people can see it. And it was great. What was your takeaways from it?
I love it. I love that we had a lot of new people that just started the reset program. Some people that were just wanting to learn about it, which was cool, but also a few people that have been doing it for a little while.
Right.
Because they always come and provide valuable insight to the people that are just starting. I always think that's the best part.
That's what blows me away, is that people just show up and then they just add so much value to what we're offering, what we're saying. And so it's not just us. And what's cool to me too is like our Facebook group, the private group for the people that have paid for the program. It's gotten to the point now that when people ask a question, it gets answered before you and I have a chance to.
Right.
So that's pretty cool to me. So I took the same thing away from that. So we will post that for you so you can watch it and listen in. So that was last week, and then next week, so a week from Wednesday, we're going to talk about sleep, because that's the next step in our whole biohacking wellness thing, is maximizing your sleep.
The importance of sleep.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. You won't live long if you don't sleep. So
and it's hard to lose weight.
And it's impossible to lose weight if you're not sleeping appropriately. So
awesome.
Cool. Well, we came across some rather fun stuff this previous week.
It's my favorite thing to do, right? Is to like find research studies or books that quote, studies or whatever, follow certain people, and then like dig into the research.
Right. So the first thing that pops into my mind, and we didn't talk about this, was the idiocy behind trying to ban gas stoves because they cause respiratory and other health problems.
Yeah.
This is really what our government is spending money on?
Oh, and that obese children can now have gastric
Oh
sleeves.
my gosh, yes. That's the new like norm, is to medicate these kids and give them gastric sleeves. Meanwhile, that's a perfect segue into what we're really going to rage about today, and that is this Tufts food compass. Like we have a new dietary guidelines brought to you by the federal government, paid for by Coca-Cola, and we can't wait to share it with you.
Paid for by Coca-Cola.
No joke.
And the National Institute of Health. So it's like a combination. But basically, the White House, they have these conferences on like hunger and nutrition and health, and then they like use this. They're like presenters and organizers of the conference. One of them is this president of Tufts. It's like a school of nutrition. Anyway, 3-year study, you guys. 3 years. I think it just said millions of dollars.
Okay, so let's back up. 3 years of study, and one of the things that I do when I look at articles, and I've been through the Tufts study, is go to the funding section and figure out where they got their money from.
Right.
Okay, but what you have to do is you have to dig a little bit deeper, because they're not always going to be very forthright about where they get their funding. So National Institute of Health was a small participant in the financial backing of this. But if you peel the layers back of where National Institute of Health gets their money, if you learned anything from 2020, I hope we learned that government health agencies are very, very swayed
by big food,
by money. Big pharma, big food, they're all going to influence NIH.
Right.
Hey, and let's not forget who was in charge of the NIH, Anthony Fauci.
Right.
So if you dig a little deeper on some of the stuff that he's done and some of the backing, it's criminal. But the idiocy in this Tufts study is very, very apparent when you start looking at, okay, who actually paid to have this study done, because that's going to influence what the study says.
Right. I mean, we could just go to the beginning of the original food pyramid. Well, not the original, because it's definitely changed. It's gotten worse as time has gone on, and campaigning and lobbying has increased. The food pyramid has drastically changed from what it was in 1940 or whatever.
Right. So let's wind it back to 1950, and we can start talking about the 7-country food study, because that's really where all this started. This is when the government got involved with trying to tell us what's good for us, is with this 7-country study. And I'm totally brain farting on, Ansel Keys is the guy's name. So Ansel Keys does this study where he takes 7 countries and he looks at the diets of those countries, what the people ate, and then looked at what people died of in those countries. And the end result of the 7-country study was high-fat diets kill people.
We've been rolling with it ever since.
And we've been rolling with it ever since.
But we're getting sicker.
We've been getting sicker and sicker. We've completely ignored one crucial piece of information about the 7-country study, and that it was 22 countries, and we cherry-picked the best 7 to fit the best 7 to fit the current narrative, which was, hey, we've got this drug that can lower cholesterol, so let's push this narrative to sell that drug.
And along with that was the people that paid off the Harvard researchers.
Right.
So Big Food paying off Harvard researchers to not disclose that sugar was causing heart disease and that it was actually fat. Like they've literally come out, and you can find that information now. And so the researchers literally then lied and put forth the wrong, incorrect information.
This isn't the only time. Right. You look at the biggest criminal fine ever imposed by the Department of Justice. Who was it against? Mm-hmm. It was against Pfizer for lying and hiding data on research on pain meds. Why anyone trusts any of these organizations is absolutely beyond me.
Right.
If you just read a little deeper, we'll throw some references in there, because there's that great, the Great Cholesterol Myth. That was an awesome book. My favorite one from this year was Sickening. So we'll put links to all that so you can find those.
Okay, speaking of books, right? We need to stock the libraries, people. Okay, so I just listened to a podcast this weekend and talking about that in the near future, you are not going to be able to web search for these things, or maybe find it on podcasts or whatever, because that's not the narrative. And so all of this information is going to be more difficult and more difficult and more difficult to find. But if you can get it in a book right now,
get it on your shelf.
Get it on your shelf, then you have the reference, because it's like it was a physician who wanted Dr. Mercola to do her foreword. No publisher would publish her book as long as Dr. Mercola did her foreword, so she had to have somebody else do it. So it was just kind of like that alarming of wow, we are attempting to control what information is put forth. So, anyways.
So let's go back to this Tufts.
This Tufts study.
So you guys might just blow this off and think it's not that big a deal because you can choose what you want to eat, which is cool.
Right.
But you got to understand, it's studies like this that drives what they feed our kids in schools, and it drives what they feed our patients in hospitals. It drives what they feed grandma and grandpa in the nursing care facility. Prisons, dietitian guidelines are all going to be based off of
these
studies like this that are funded by food companies. So what was it that was so alarming about this Tufts study?
So basically the thing, what's hitting headlines of holistic people, right, that you might read, is that Lucky Charms and Honey Nut Cheerios rated higher than ground beef and eggs. So that was the bullet headline that was going out across some of these pages that made me start digging into it. As I peeled back the layers, it's very evident that it's still demonizing animal products and fat. So eggs with butter, the whole egg, the egg white got higher than the whole egg. But it's we've been showing this to be wrong year after year after year. We know this by now, yet I guess we don't know this by now. It's everything is showing that animal products are healthy, that kind of protein is the best protein your body can absorb. But now we're going to say, actually, have a chocolate covered almond. Or it's, going to put forth that almond milk is healthier than a raw whole milk, which we know, like, it's just not. Like, it has skim milk higher than whole milk. It's right. The low fat things are high or considered to be good for you. It doesn't matter if the fruit was canned, like, it's still going to have a higher rating than your steak. But yeah, the tagline is that it's cereals.
Right. Like Lucky Charms on their it was 1 to 100.
Right.
Right. So.
And then it was broken down, like 70 to 100 you could consume, like
right, regularly. And then
middle ground was like to be, in moderation. The other was to be minimized.
Lucky Charms got stuck in there in the middle ground at 60.
But ground beef was like 20.
Ground beef was at 26.
Yeah.
So whole animal protein scored lower than Lucky Charms because it might have fat in it. Now, we could really get goofy about this and talk about ground beef from grass-fed beef versus ground beef from regularly produced beef, because the ground beef from the grass-fed beef should score higher if this is the if we're using this scoring system, but they just threw it in there as ground beef. So the study really isn't complete. Right. So we're just looking at the list that we have. Watermelons at 100. I would argue that for a while. Because it is a higher glycemic fruit.
But canned
peaches are on 97. What are they canned in?
Sugar, fructose, high fructose.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we don't know that because it could be an aspartame, like one of the sugar-free canned peaches where they put a bunch of chemical garbage in there.
But don't worry, non-fat chocolate frozen yogurt is an 81. Egg fried in butter, 29. It's to be minimized.
So, what's the moral of the story here?
It is so sad. That's my moral of the story.
The moral of the story is if you're going to be lazy and not look into things for yourself and just depend on the government to spoon feed you, you're going to be a sad, sick person, depressed out of your mind.
And your kids are going to be unhealthy.
And your kids are going to pay for that.
I think that's what I was thinking. I'm sitting here like, okay, obviously, I have a brain. I know that Lucky Charms are not better for me. I'm not going to feed that to my children, da-da-da-da-da. But yeah, pause for a second. I've worked in rehab before, right? I worked in a rehabilitation center. I watched what they fed stroke patients that are in a rehab facility. They're literally bringing around a cart in the morning prior to them going to physical therapy with muffins, juice, bagels, pastry, all these things run by a dietitian
based off of
stuff like this
government food guidelines.
Yeah, so I think that is where it is problematic. Like, it is problematic that the Senate does pass off, I just read this, that pizza can be considered a vegetable because of the tomato sauce, therefore it can be school lunches, that counts as a vegetable. Like, that's a problem. So I just look at, like,
tomato's not even a vegetable.
I know. But we're getting more sick and more fat and more chronic disease. Like, when is someone going to say clearly what we're doing is not working?
Right. But there's so much money involved that we can't.
Right. We can't separate it.
You go back to that book, Sickening, and the author talks about, John Abrams, I think his name is, talks about Congress and Senate, every member of Congress and Senate, their payroll outside of their jobs of being a lawmaker, so they are on Big Pharma's payroll for the tune of like $400,000 a year. That's the average, which means there's some good honest people that aren't taking anything, and then there's scumbags that are taking more and more and more and padding the pharmaceutical companies' agenda, the big food company. And that was just pharmaceutical companies. Who knows how much money they're getting from lobbyists, from Coke.
Well, yeah, the ones that were big names resources. In here, Coca-Cola's a huge one. And that came out, okay, why would Coke care? Like, why does Coke care But then I read that SNAP, so your money given to low-income families to buy food, like the biggest portion of sales on that goes to soft drinks. Okay, why are they allowed to buy soft drinks with that? That's a whole nother topic.
Well,
but it was like, light bulb moment.
Right.
This is why Coke cares.
Right. So it reminds me of when, a year ago when my dad passed and they had him on the nasal feeding tube. I pulled out, I actually have a picture of the bag of food that he was getting, and guess what label was on it? Nestle.
Right.
And you go through the ingredients of whatever this crap was they were giving him, and it was like soy-based proteins, sugar, and it was just the cheapest possible ingredients you could find. But then you start thinking about, wait a minute, Medicare is going to pay a tremendous amount of money for that bag.
Right.
So Nestle or Carnation, I can't remember which one it was, they're going to put the cheapest stuff in there possible,
make the biggest profit.
So the hospital can buy that bag from them, make the biggest profit, then the hospital turns around, sells it to Medicare, and makes a huge profit. It's just this big financial wheel that keeps on turning, which had Dad made better dietary choices in the beginning, he never would have ended up in that position in the first place. But he didn't, because he listened to
that's what I think. It's like, if we're not going to take, and lots of people aren't going to take the time. Like, I probably spent 3 hours this weekend, researching this because I find it interesting and I care. The average person doesn't do that. They are just going to say, well, this has to be right.
Because it's the government. They wouldn't lead us astray. I used to think that. It's the government. They won't lead us astray.
And some people are like, well, but my doctor. It's like, your doctor doesn't have the time. I listened to a really cool podcast where you could tell one of the people was really frustrated with the medical field. The other person is in the medical field. She is an MD, but she also has a holistic practice. Really kind of giving them a little bit of credit. Like, they were kind of going back and forth, where it's kind of like, then they both kind of came to the conclusion that they don't have time, right? Like, with their patient load, the education they were given, no nutrition, right? What information they do get now all comes from pharmaceutical companies. They don't have time with their caseloads to go out and spend hours researching the latest whatever. So they're dependent upon the information they're given. They were saying the best thing to do would just to be like, there are better people that know nutrition now. Like, don't take this advice from me type thing.
Right.
But it was just interesting, right? So we're really losing that, the experts, I guess. Like, where do you now go? And the girl was saying, she's like, I went back to school in a functional medicine realm. I don't have $300,000 in medical school debt, and now I can be the expert on this, but that seems so twisted, kind of.
Right. Well, we have, and Abrams points this out in his book. We're still in a position where we're holding, physicians up almost like this level of deity, like they know everything and they can do no wrong. And it's not their fault. Like, I know a lot of very, very good doctors who mean very, very well, but they're part of the system that takes all this information that's brought to them on glossy sheets by attractive people saying, here's the drug you need to prescribe for this, coupled with people sitting in front of the stupid box and watching TV and football and just buying whatever the ads are telling them to buy, going to the doctor saying, I have this symptom, I need this drug.
Coupled with doctors having to diagnose with a code so they get paid.
Yeah. I mean, it's just this big...
so it's the system, right?
It's a hamster wheel.
It's not the people. If you take that back, it's like they have to have a code if they're going to get reimbursed from an insurance company.
Right.
The code means they're going to have to find something that they can diagnose, right? Which may not be what's really maybe the underlying root. So it's just, but that's why these things matter. Because, like, it's all funneled down. Like, who cares that Lucky Charms is rated higher than ground beef? It actually is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, you should care.
Because now when your kids go to lunch, guess what's going to be on their plate? Like, it showed, like, New York City public school lunch, because now they have to have, like, a vegan day or something. So there's, like, no protein sources, and it's, like, Rice Krispies, a bagel. I can't remember all the things, but there's just no nutrition for our kids. And take aside weight. Right? Like, I think that's one thing I think about often is, okay, my own children don't have weight issues, right? Like, they could eat junk and not really gain weight. Just genetics.
Right.
However, there's so much more to crap food than weight. How are their brains working? Can they actually concentrate at school? Can they remember anything that they're learning? What are their moods like? What's their energy level? Do they keep getting injured on the ball field? Are they continually catching every bug that comes around? Like, there's so much more to poor nutrition than simply my child's obese. Because that's what you hear. Like, you hear our children are more obese than ever, which is factual.
Right.
Go to a school and you'll see that. But if you're the person like me saying, oh, well, my child's not obese, so it's fine. Okay. They did a comprehension test. They did this study recently with like preschoolers, asking them about a TV show they watched or a book they were read. A group that was given like sugary garbage food and one that was given whole foods. Drastic difference. So I mean, there's a lot of other issues that I think, okay, so our kids go to school, talk to any teacher, ask them what behavior is like currently in the classroom. It's a lot worse than it was 30 years ago. Like, things like that are getting worse too, and I think we overlook that. And they're going to continue to get garbage lunches because we just got a new study.
Fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have rambled on for a while. We were going to talk about laser and TBI, but I think we'll just pocket that and save it for next time.
All right.
So, moral of the story, do your own homework. We'll give you links. We'll try to share with you the best information that we find as the time goes on,
and think about it.
And think through, try to think through things logically.
Right, because I think that's the thing, let's think. How do you feel after you eat a bowl of Lucky Charms compared to you ate a steak for dinner?
Right. Big difference.
Big difference. How do I feel?
And our kids are just little humans.
Right. All right.
Okay, thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.